Why don't we get right into it? What do you think was the most impactful draft choice of the 49ers draft weekend?
Well, I mean, in terms of 2023, it's probably Jake Moody, the kicker, because he's going to be have the most impact. He's going to be out there the most, probably of all these guys. Um, you can see several scenarios where games come down to the wire, and it's up to Jake Moody to win it. So, I think that there was a real eye toward 2024 with a lot of these picks, and that's what happens when you have a loaded roster like the 49ers. I know the 49ers draft as a whole has like landed at number 32 on all of these draft gurus rankings, but there's a reason for that. I mean, there's not a lot of starting positions available. So even if they had picks in the first or the second round, it's very unlikely that those guys would have been penciled into a starting spot. So I think a lot of these guys, the Robert Beals, even Jair Brown, the top pick, these are guys that the 49ers are looking at for 2024. Obviously, if there are injuries, that could be accelerated, but if all goes according to plan, I think this draft class as a whole, really you start to see them factor in next season.
Everybody was critical of the Moody pick because it was a kicker in the third round, but it was the compensatory picks after the third round. Essentially, it's the fourth round. The fourth round has been kind of the kicker round or the specialist round. If you have a great punter, could go in the fourth. A great kicker could go as high as the fourth. I wasn't quite as like, oh my God, just simply from the standpoint, I think they got a pretty good kicker. I think they got a guy who's, clutch, who kicked in some cold weather, who went 4 for 4 in the college football playoffs. And I think if you're going to be real with yourself, you got to acknowledge that, the 49er fans have seen very little pain when it comes to kicking. And so you better get a good one. If you're going to replace Robbie Gould, who had never missed in the playoffs, you better get a guy who's thought to be a really good kicker because I think the fan base is going to have a hard time the first time, Moody misses a regular season kick, let alone a postseason kick. And the fact that he's considered clutch and he's got a relatively strong leg. There's always a transition because it's a different deal kicking in college than the pros. But if this guy can be their kicker for the foreseeable future, I have no problem with him being picked in the third round. Everybody points to Roberto Aguayo going in the second round and then getting bounced out of the league. Obviously, that's a bad scenario. Anytime you use a day 2 pick and the guy's out of the league within a year, but I think a lot of it comes down to how are they wired mentally, and by all accounts, Moody is a guy who's absolutely a guy who loves being in the moment, loves the pressure. Kicked well in the cold weather and the wind, and Big Ten football in November and December. There are no domes for the most part. You're playing outside, and it's the conditions are there every week. So I kind of like that. Does that mean that that obviously means no more Robbie Gould, but does it mean that Zane Gonzalez gets cut now, or do they go into camp and have a little competition? How do you see that whole thing shaking out?
Yeah, I don't think it hurts to have Zane Gonzalez on the roster. I mean, he's done it. He can offer advice. He can push Jake Moody, and Zane Gonzalez's only issue is that he's gotten hurt a lot. That his teams haven't been able to rely on him. So maybe it's Zane and Jake throughout the offseason. And if Zane Gonzalez is still healthy at the end of training camp, he's somebody that they might be able to trade. So they had this very, small trade with Carolina. I think it was a conditional 7th that landed Zane Gonzalez here. They may be able to get something a little bit better than that for him. So, they may have played their cards absolutely right when it comes to that. And maybe it's something where they keep him around on the practice squad if they're not able to trade him or if he isn't get picked up. My assumption is that if they do cut him, he does get picked up because that's the bottom line of this draft. It's a rare draft in that there were 6, 7 teams looking for a kicker. And that's precisely why the 49ers felt compelled to take Moody at the end of round 3. Moody, I was just talking to Moody's holder at Michigan, offered a lot of great insights and, very much what you were saying. This guy is unflappable. But he was telling me that they had 8 workouts with teams. So the holder gets called into the workout as well.
Sure, yeah.
And that's just unheard of. I mean, maybe 2 or 3 in a normal year will the top kicker get that, but they had everybody coming in each week to kind of put them through the ringer and to have Jake Moody do kickoffs. That's a big deal. Kickoffs wear out the leg like nothing else. So it just underscores the attention A, kickers were getting, and B, this particular kicker we're getting. If he gets past the 49ers in the third round there, very, very likely that he gets snapped up by the Patriots or the Lions or one of those 7 other teams that worked him out in that fourth round.
Let's get into the picks. Jair Brown from Penn State. What do you think? I mean, I like it from the standpoint of I see more of an Earl Thomas. Some people say, oh, he's a box safety. I don't think so. I think this guy can play the deep middle or in the box. And I think he runs, even though he ran the 4.65, if you watch the film, he runs fast enough. Very productive player, MVP of the Rose Bowl, and I watched that game start to finish. He was everywhere, sacking the quarterback. He made a pick. He's tackling against the run. He might have been the reason that Penn State won that game. What do you think? What are you hearing about Jair Brown? And do you give? See, I think there's a chance that he takes Gibson's position because I think he's a better all around hitter, a little bit more physical than Gibson is at this point. I think Gibson's a great deep center fielder, but I like the flexibility of Brown. I think he can play in the box or in the deep middle. What are you hearing? What do you like?
Yeah, I watched that game too. He definitely
Yeah,
definitely pops in that, and I'm sure the 49ers had that rolling in their draft room as well. Yeah, I mean, he's just a good fit. He's a good culture fit too.
right.
Everything I've read about him, he's the guy in practice during the week that's got everybody revving. He's the guy in the locker room before the game at halftime. Just pregame huddle. That's the guy. He was Penn State's version of Fred Warner. So the Warner Brown combination, I think, is going to be really complementary. Two guys cut from the same cloth there. The speed, though, I mean, I think that is a concern because it's not like he's being complimented by a burner in Talanoa Hufanga. That's exactly Talanoa Hufanga's critique. Didn't run very fast. Now, has that manifested itself on the field? I don't think so. I mean, Talanoa Hufanga has not been perfect as a deep safety, but the mistakes has made, I think, are more sort of over aggressive mistakes. Bites on a play fake. Comes up on the wrong receiver. There haven't been many. I can't even think of one, and I'm sure there are a couple, but I can't recall anywhere you're left saying, "Wow, he's just too slow to be back there." That hasn't occurred yet. Now he hasn't been perfect, but it hasn't been that type of situation. So my point is that maybe this critique about Brown's foot speed is kind of similar. Is that instincts and things like that are more important than the time 40 speed, and that we won't end up seeing that. But it is something that I think you have to keep in mind because it's clear that Hufanga Brown is the duo for the future.